There's something people have said to you your whole life. You're so forgiving. And you smiled, maybe nodded, accepted it as a compliment, the way you accept most things quietly, without making a fuss. But there are nights sitting alone after a phone call that left you hollow, when you wonder if forgiving so easily isn't a gift at all. If it's something else entirely. Something older. Something that started long before you had the words to understand it. This video is for the people who has forgiven people who never apologized, who made peace with things that were never made right, who told herself, "It's fine," so many times stopped noticing it wasn't. What you're about to hear isn't a lesson in forgiveness, it's a mirror, and if it reflects something true, stay with it. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that never quite shows on your face. It isn't the tiredness that comes from not sleeping, it's the tiredness that comes from absorbing, from processing, from quietly, constantly, making room for other people's behavior while somehow finding a way to call it peace. You've been doing it for decades. Someone hurts you, and almost before the sting settles, before you've even fully felt it, something in you is already building a bridge back to them, already finding the explanation, already softening the edges of what happened so it's easier to carry. People call it grace. They call it maturity. They call it being the bigger person. But what if it isn't only that? What if beneath the forgiveness, beneath the warmth and the open hands, there are 6 very specific traits that have been quietly shaping you since long before you were old enough to choose them? Not flaws, not failures, traits, patterns, marks left by a life fully lived, and wounds that found their own quiet way of surviving. If you've ever forgiven someone and then lay awake that same night, wondering why you couldn't just stay angry, this is for you. Stay with this until the end. Because what surfaces in the last few minutes will change how you understand yourself, not just in forgiveness, but in everything. If this is already describing you, that's not a coincidence. This channel exists for minds exactly like yours. You don't need to subscribe yet. Just notice you came here for a reason. Trait 1. You were taught that love had conditions, so you learned to erase conflict fast. Most people who forgive easily weren't born that way. They were shaped that way. There's a particular kind of childhood, not necessarily a dramatic one, not one with obvious chaos where love felt slightly contingent, where the warmth in the room shifted depending on your behavior, where keeping the peace wasn't just preferred, it was necessary. Maybe it was a parent who went cold when you expressed frustration. Maybe it was a household where tension sat in the air like weather, and you learned early that you were somehow responsible for clearing it. Maybe nothing was ever said directly. It never had to be. You learned to read the room before you learned to read a book, and one of the most efficient ways to restore safety, to bring the warmth back, was to let things go, quickly, visibly, to be the one who said, "It's okay" first, to smooth it over before it could calcify into something dangerous. You weren't being a pushover, you were being a child who needed love to feel stable. The forgiveness came later, but the instinct, the need to resolve conflict fast, to not let hurt linger, to be the one who extends the olive branch that came from somewhere much earlier than you may have realized. It's exhausting to always be the one who reaches first, even now, even after all this time. But it isn't weakness, it's a survival pattern that once kept something precious intact. The question now is, whose safety are you still protecting? Trait 2. You have an unusually high tolerance for being misunderstood. Here's something almost no one will tell you. People who forgive easily tend to have spent so long feeling misunderstood that being hurt by someone still feels more tolerable than being disconnected from them. Read that again slowly. The hurt you can process. The distance, that hollow, wordless estrangement, that's the thing that frightens you most. Because you know what it is to sit in a room full of people and feel invisible, to have said something true about yourself and watched it get ignored or minimized or reframed into something more comfortable for the other person. You've had your experience corrected, your feelings re-explained back to you. Your reality quietly revised by people who preferred their version of you. And so, over time, you made a kind of internal agreement. I will keep the connection, even if it costs me. Forgiving quickly became a way of staying in the room, of not being cast out, of maintaining the thread of relationship even when the relationship had frayed you. There's a moment so many people in their 50s and 60s recognize as sitting in the car after a difficult phone call, phone still in hand, already composing the version of events that lets the other person off the hook, already deciding it wasn't that bad, already forgiving before the call has even fully ended. That moment isn't weakness. It's decades of practice at keeping yourself tethered to people, because somewhere deep down, you were afraid that if you held the hurt too long, they would leave. And the leaving felt more unbearable than the hurt. That's not a character flaw. That's a wound with a very long memory. Trait 3. You feel other people's pain physically, and staying angry feels like cruelty. There is something particular about the way you experience other people's distress. It doesn't stay on the outside. When someone you care about is hurting, even someone who has hurt you, you feel it move through you. A tightening in the chest. A strange, almost guilty ache. As though their pain is somehow your responsibility. As though your anger is the thing causing it. This is called emotional permeability. And it runs deep in people who forgive too easily. You don't just understand that the person who hurt you might be struggling. You feel it. And when forgiveness can ease their guilt, when releasing them can stop that particular kind of ache, it becomes very hard to justify staying angry. Anger, for people like you, doesn't feel like protection. It feels like punishment, like something you're inflicting. And you are not the kind of person who inflicts things. So you let it go, sometimes before you've even felt it fully, sometimes while the wound is still fresh. Because holding the anger means watching someone you care about suffer under it, and that, somehow, feels worse than the original hurt. What nobody tells you is that this is a form of profound emotional intelligence. You are wired to sense the interior world of others with unusual accuracy. That is not nothing, that is rare, but it comes with a cost. Because the person whose pain you feel most rarely is yourself. If you've made it this far, you've already felt seen at least once. That's rare. The reason you're still here is that something about this is true for you. Trait 4. You've made peace with things that were never actually resolved. There's a difference between forgiveness and peace. True forgiveness is a release that happens inside you, independent of the other person. It asks nothing of them. It simply puts down the weight. But what many people who forgive easily actually do is something quieter, something lonelier. They make peace with things that were never resolved. They absorb the incompleteness. They carry the unfinished conversation, the apology that never came, the acknowledgement that was never offered, and they tuck it somewhere interior, and they call it letting go. It isn't letting go, it's swallowing. You may have done this with a parent who never said sorry, a partner who minimized what you went through, a friendship that ended without explanation, a version of your life that was changed by someone else's choices, and no one ever sat with you in that grief. You didn't get the closure, so you manufactured it. You talked yourself into understanding their perspective. You found the extenuating circumstances. You built the case for their defense inside your own mind so thoroughly that you almost believed the verdict yourself. And there's something deeply admirable in that, something that speaks to an extraordinary capacity for perspective and endurance. But somewhere beneath it, beneath all that constructed peace, there may still be something that was never allowed to be angry, never allowed to say, that wasn't right. What happened to me was not right. You don't have to say it out loud, but it may be time to let yourself think it. Trait 5. You believe quietly, deeply that you are hard to love. This one may arrive quietly. It may arrive like a small, familiar recognition rather than a revelation. Because it isn't new. You've known this one for a long time. You've just never quite had the language for it. Somewhere along the way, and it happened early, in the kind of years that leave marks, you absorbed the belief that you were somehow too much or not enough, or simply difficult in ways that required managing. That the people who stayed needed to be kept, earned, held gently so they wouldn't slip away. And so forgiveness became partly a way of making yourself easier to be around. If I'm not someone who holds grudges, they'll stay. If I don't make this a bigger deal than it is, they'll stay. If I let this go, if I show them I'm not the kind of person who makes things hard, they'll stay. It was never about weakness. It was about the exhausting, decades-long project of making yourself lovable enough that the people who mattered wouldn't leave. And the grief in that, the quiet, rarely spoken grief of having spent so long managing yourself for others, is something you deserve to let yourself feel. Because you were never hard to love. You were taught to believe you were, by people who didn't know how to love you properly. That's not the same thing. It was never the same thing. Trait 6. You are still protecting the version of yourself who needed peace to survive. This is the one that sits underneath all the others. The forgiveness isn't random. The forgiveness isn't simply generosity, though it can look like that from the outside. At its deepest root, the forgiveness has always been about survival. There is a version of you, younger, less certain, navigating something she wasn't equipped for, who learned that peace was safer than conflict, that absorbing was safer than fighting back. That letting go quickly meant the danger passed faster. He was right, in the world she was living in. He found the strategy that worked, at the time he needed it most. And somehow, across all the decades that followed, across the relationships and the losses, and the versions of yourself you've grown into, and out of that young strategy, survived. It became automatic. It became you, or what you took yourself to be. But you are not that child anymore. You are a people who has earned, through decades of living, the right to feel her own hurt without rushing to dissolve it. You are allowed to feel it first. You are allowed to take time. You are allowed to be someone whose forgiveness, when it finally comes, means something because it was chosen freely, not offered reflexively. The version of you who needed peace to survive did a remarkable thing. It kept you safe. It kept you connected. It carried you through. But this doesn't need to run things anymore. You do. You came here, perhaps, because someone called you too forgiving, and something in you quietly wondered if they were right. Or perhaps because you've spent years doing something that looked like grace, but felt like loss. Or perhaps simply because you are a person who carries a great deal quietly, capably, without making it anyone else's problem, and something in you was hoping to feel understood for once, without having to explain yourself first. All 6 of these traits have one thing in common. They are not weaknesses dressed up as insights. They are not things to fix. They are the evidence of a life in which you felt deeply, loved without guarantees, survived without adequate support, and still somehow remained open. That isn't nothing. That is, in fact, extraordinary. What changes now isn't the forgiveness. You may always be someone who forgives. That may simply be who you are, at the level that matters. What changes is the why. Not because staying angry feels wrong. Not because their comfort matters more than your truth. Not because you are afraid of the distance. But because you, having felt it fully, having let yourself know that what happened was real, chose to put it down. That is what forgiveness actually is. Not the erasure of the hurt. The decision, made freely, finally, to stop carrying it for someone else. This channel exists for people who carry quietly and who have spent too long without language for who they are. If that's you, subscribe. Not because I'm asking, but because somewhere inside, you already know you belong here. Take a breath. You've just spent 15 minutes with yourself, maybe for the first time in a long time. That matters. Don't let this feeling pass too quickly. Sit with it for a moment. You carried something into this video that you've been carrying alone for years. You don't have to carry it the same way anymore. The understanding you just found, that belongs to you now. No one can take that back. Take care of yourself. Truly.